All right, it is February 26, 2023, or at least this video is being released on February 26, 2023. Square and Compass Promotions, Cameron Adamson here. This is going to be not an interview, not one of my more normal videos. This one, we're going to be focusing on the 2030 Sustainability Pledge, which Square and Compass Promotions, which my company took. We took the pledge. I wrote about that in Medium. And now I want to go through kind of more what that means, and in particular, go through the Sustainability Pledge assessment. Square and Compass Promotions, one of the things that we do outside of the podcast, outside of reporting on or sharing information with different Masonic events and different Masonic journeys, and providing information that can assist Masonic buildings or otherwise. One of the things that we also do is we offer in-person and virtual tours of the Windsor Masonic Temple. Now that COVID restrictions are lifted or lifting, we do primarily in-person tours for what is a truly historic and beautiful building. Because we offer tours, that makes us in part, part of the tourism sector, bringing in either local tourists who are taking a staycation, learning more about their hometown, or we are if not a local tourist destination, then, people travel from out of town, from out of the province, from out of the country, since we're so close to Detroit, to see this beautiful building and to tour this, amazing historical building and this piece of Windsor history. Part of that means that we have to also take the time to be concerned about sustainability. And, are we doing what we can to ensure that our practices are such we're going to be around in 2030, 2040, 2050. And also the Sustainability Pledge, it also can be applicable to Masonic buildings, because many Masonic buildings act as tourist destinations. Detroit comes to mind, Philadelphia comes to mind, Bay City hosts tours in Michigan. These are places these are buildings, these are temples that act not only as Masonic homes, but as places of interest. When people visit a city, one of the things they may go and see is the Masonic Temple, because they're so beautiful and so amazing and so historical. So, as a tourist destination, sometimes called an anchor destination or tourist destinations, Masonic buildings may want to look at some of these sustainability pledges and sustainability assessments to determine how they can also make their buildings accessible. Or not accessible, make their buildings sustainable. Make their buildings sustainable, and what that means for their membership and the tourists they attract and the communities in which they're located. And with that, let's get started and check out more about and learn more about the 2030 Sustainability Pledge. All right, so let's start with the sustainabletourism2030.com homepage, or the pledge page. The Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge is a commitment to improve the sustainability performance of your tourism business, Square and Compass Promotions, or destination between now and 2030. So again, destination, a lot of Masonic buildings are tourist destinations. And even if you don't want to, or the building doesn't want to do this formally, look into taking the pledge formally, that doesn't mean from an informal perspective or an informal way, the temple, the Masonic building can't look at some of these sustainability questions and try to improve upon them and try to become more sustainable for not just till 2030, but for the next 100 years and beyond. I really love the highlighted section, because I think that there's a lot of synergy between this section and how I view Freemasonry, how I even view the Windsor Masonic Temple. Launched in June 2021, the Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge is a global movement of individuals, businesses, and organizations within the tourism and hospitality industry that believe tourism has a tremendous opportunity to become a force for good and change the world. I've talked about this before. I'm sure I've mentioned it on my podcast before. I think that Freemasonry has a tremendous opportunity to become a force for good and change the world. In fact, it already has, in many instances, been a force for good and changed the world in a positive way. But that doesn't mean that Freemasonry or Square and Compass Promotions or any Masonic buildings should be resting on those accomplishments. It's important that we continue to work hard in order to maintain those and grow those and keep being a force for good and change the world in the future. The purpose of the Sustainable Tourism Pledge is to help businesses and destinations measure and improve their sustainability performance. So I'm going to go through, specifically in this case, the way in which that performance is first measured and then remeasured. And I'm hoping that this assessment, this measurement, will give buildings, will give Masons some ideas about how they can perhaps look at some of these sustainability benchmarks and sustainability measurements. And maybe then they themselves would like to take the sustainability pledge. I will be leaving in the description to this video all of the links that describe all of the links so that you can take the pledge, how to take the pledge, and how to measure and how to take part in these things, which, the assessment itself, the pledge itself, is completely free to do. And also I'll be leaving the link to the Medium article, which Square and Compass wrote, talking about our taking of the pledge. So this is the Sustainable Tourism Assessment. The Sustainable Tourism Assessment is your first step towards understanding your sustainability score, helping measure sustainability performance with criteria based upon Global Sustainable Tourism Council criteria. All right. So we launch assessment. Here it is. Took a second there. There are 4 areas: management, social and economic impacts, natural and cultural interactions, environmental impacts. And again, not all of these may be applicable to any, one specific Masonic building. Not all of them are necessarily specific to Square and Compass Promotions. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to go through some of the ones and some of the assessment pieces that I think are particularly relevant or particularly useful for Masonic buildings and for ourselves at Square and Compass to be thinking about. So I really even like right off the bat, the very first question: does your entity have an ongoing sustainability management system, and or in what ways is sustainability integrated into your entity's management system? A vision, mission, or commitment statement pertaining to sustainability action plan, measurable sustainability goals, alignment with UN Sustainable Development Goals, sustainability performance, or other. I've put down other, particularly because of our work with the promoting and encouraging Masonic buildings to apply for grant and grant applications that promote sustainability, particularly in 2 areas: sustainability as it relates to energy savings, energy reductions through the Green Inclusive Community Building Program, and accessibility, which is a type of sustainability, making sure that your building is, making sure that Masonic buildings, or if you do tours or your tours are accessible, that the community can take part in them, and they're open to everybody. If you go to social and economic impacts, again, right off the bat, you see here things that could be very relevant to a Masonic building, a Masonic lodge, a Masonic organization that can act as tourist destinations or anchor destinations. In what ways does your entity participate in community projects? Does the people involved in your building, and looking at Square and Compass, volunteering, monetary and kind donations, donation of good or unused goods, partnerships with community organizations, or other. So again, in what ways, in the case of Square and Compass Promotions, and in the case of, even our work with the Windsor Masonic Temple, regularly volunteering at outside agencies, but even in here, volunteering even in the Windsor Masonic Temple, there's volunteers at the Scottish Rite Learning Center. Many Masonic lodges, Masonic groups make monetary or in-kind donations. They'll collect coats for kids. They'll collect gloves and hats at Christmas, or donations for food banks I've seen. Do you bring in community organizations to use your building? Do you talk with community organizations about how you can work with them to not only help the Masonic Temple, the Masonic building, but otherwise, Square and Compass Promotions is proud to regularly work with local community organizations, community businesses. We worked with 519 Culture. We've worked with multiple Alzheimer's Society. We've tried to promote multiple community organizations that can provide assistance and information for Freemasons and also for the community at large. Does your building do the same thing? What type of infrastructure or social and community development initiatives does your entity support through cash or in-kind contributions at the local or international level? Again, are you sponsoring local community events? Are you sponsoring community events? Are you encouraging those things? Are you advertising for those things? Does your entity encourage and promote guest support for local community businesses, volunteer and donation opportunities, and other charitable initiatives? Again, maybe your Masonic building hosts events that you promote, that you encourage. The Windsor Masonic Temple holds annual Christmas dinners or annual holiday dinners. They're non-denominational for people who are maybe new to the country, isolated, or otherwise just looking for a place to spend the holiday season. This year we even had at the Windsor Masonic Temple, they had a therapeutic horse. That was a great guest. A lot of Masonic buildings take part in things like this. And it's important that when those buildings are doing so, that they take the time to record it. Does your entity track your impacts on the community, either positive or negative impacts? I think that this is one of the ones that is sorely lacking for Masonic buildings. For Square and Compass Promotions, we regularly ask for feedback through social media. At the end of a tour, we'll ask for feedback. We'll ask those people who took the tour, those attendees, what did they think of it? How can we make it better? What did they enjoy? What did they not enjoy? And, Masonic buildings should be doing the same thing, both with its membership and otherwise. Are you taking the time to send out, maybe on social media, ask people in the community, do you have memories of our Masonic building? Have you been in our Masonic building for a special event, for a wedding? What was it like? Do you have pictures of our building when you were here at an event? Or, the negative. What can our building, our Masonic lodge do better? How can we be more of involved in the community? What would you like to see from us as a neighbor, as a member within this community? I think, Square and Compass does, primarily through social media. I think more Masonic buildings need to be doing the same thing. Some of these, again, going here, in what ways does your entity ask for or receive feedback from your neighbors? Other, again, social media. Sending out also letters inviting our local neighbors for a tours of our building, encouraging them to take part, to learn more about our building as a neighbor. And as a member, again, of the community, Square and Compass wants to invite people to take tours of the Windsor Masonic Temple, but many Masonic buildings are neighbors. They have neighboring businesses, neighboring residences. What are you doing in order to receive feedback, ask for and receive feedback, and be a good neighbor? Again, not all of these are going to apply to Square and Compass Promotions or a Masonic building. This is an interesting one. When you're thinking about, from Square and Compass Promotions perspective, we have used a lot of local suppliers when we were purchasing holiday gifts to give to various individuals, our patrons, for example. We used a local supplier, 519 Culture, and all of the items and products that we provided as gifts were purchased through a local sustainable provider within 300 kilometers. But let's think about that again from the perspective of the Masonic Lodge, Masonic Temple. When a junior warden, for example, is providing food and refreshment, are they taking the time to connect with local suppliers, local businesses? Are they trying to build relationships within their community, within their local businesses and be a good neighbor and create a relationship where you can have, for example, suppliers bringing in food. You can have catering services. I'm actually going to put down 80 to 100% here and make a note 519 Culture for Square and Compass Promotions. When a Masonic building is hosting a special event, what are you doing in terms of making sure, what is the building doing in making sure that that event is being provided, local services are being used, being catered by a local business? Again, these can develop relationships that can help the building, the temple, the lodge, develop these relationships that can help carry it through. Because being part of the community also means supporting the businesses in that community. And there's so many ways that a Masonic building, a Masonic lodge can do that. And it's important to think about those things. Here's one of those things that, again, how many Masonic lodges and Masonic buildings are thinking about. What aspects of your entity's marketing and communications for the staff and guests meet the accessibility requirements for those with diverse abilities, including physical, sensory, cognitive, and other? So for example, for Square and Compass Promotions, we always make sure that we note on our emails, oftentimes we'll note message available in other formats. We'll try to make sure that we will provide, on our emails, we will provide alternative text. So if somebody has a hard time seeing an image, they can at least hear or read the alternative text to understand what the image is. But what about for Freemasonry? How many times does a Masonic building, when it's advertising itself to the public as a venue, take the time to think about accessibility requirements for those with diverse abilities, for differently abled individuals, making sure that, their advertising, their marketing, their communications is reaching people who may have a hard time, may not be able to see, may not be able to, hear. Are they taking advantage of, or are they thinking about all the different ways that they can communicate to individuals with different needs? And the same thing for Freemasonry in general. When we're advertising our fraternity, when we are discussing our fraternity, are we thinking about the different ways that we can ensure our communications are accessible? And people with different abilities will be able to access those communications, understand them. Or how many of them, and if we don't do that, who are we missing in our attempts at communicating with the public and with the communities at large? Does your entity offer activities and or services catering to those with diverse abilities where appropriate? Square and Compass, again, yes. We're lucky the tours that we offer at the Windsor Masonic Temple, we have an elevator, we have accessible washrooms. But if you are part of a Masonic building that doesn't, what are you doing to bring those up to standard, to bring those up to code, to make sure that you have an accessible building, an accessible washroom, that you can bring Masons in with different abilities, or that you can bring members of the public in with different abilities for, again, if they want to rent the building out to use it for something special. I'm just going to write down here in the comments, right? We have accessible washrooms and lift for individuals taking tours. I can spell. For individuals on tours. And then, does your entity provide information on the level of accessibility provided? So when we're talking about tours at Square and Compass Promotions, we always mention we have an elevator for those with mobility impairments. And, the Windsor Masonic Temple, to its credit, when it was taking part in, for example, Doors Open Windsor, where we welcomed members of the public in for 2 days, we mentioned, when we were advertising Doors Open Windsor, that the Windsor Masonic Temple welcomed people with mobility impairments, with walkers, with wheelchairs, because we had, even, I should mention up here, accessible doors. We had accessible doors, we had a lift, we had accessible washrooms. Does your Masonic building mention whether or not it is accessible, or to what extent it is accessible? And again, this is one of those things. I'm going to put down here, yes. See above. It's really important, I think, for Masonic buildings as good members of the community to mention and to communicate and to provide information on its accessibility standards and what makes it accessible and what people can expect when they are visiting these buildings, or in the case of Square and Compass Promotions, when they're taking those tours. When we go up to natural and cultural interactions, this a lot will depend on where a Masonic building is located. Square and Compass Promotions, when it comes to, for example, Indigenous culture and heritage, we have, for example, included within much of our literature and some emails we've sent out also on our website, a land acknowledgement. And we discussed it with the local First Nations group, what the appropriate land acknowledgement would be, the wording of it. We've met with Can-Am Indian Friendship Center to talk about ways that we can work with them, and also in particular ways we can work with them in promoting the Windsor Masonic Temples for the Next 100 Years project. And again, some of these will apply to Masonic buildings, some of these won't. Some of these don't really apply to Windsor, to the Square and Compass Promotions. How does your entity help to prevent the spread of invasive species? Really, that's not something that Square and Compass Promotions is concerned with, or, we don't have wildlife and animals, guest interactions with them. So again, tailor this accessibility or sustainability assessment to your particular building, your particular entity. But this hopefully is giving you some ideas of what to think about and where you can take your Masonic buildings and apply to them, or your Masonic groups, or even your Masonic lodges may be getting some ideas from this sustainability assessment. And the last one, energy conservation. And again, I think this is incredibly important for Masonic buildings in particular. Square and Compass Promotions has really been pushing and promoting and championing the work being done by the Windsor Masonic Temple, where it relates to its For the Next 100 Years project, where it's applying for multiple grants, some of which will significantly reduce, or some of which will significantly conserve energy and reduce energy costs. Electricity, natural gas, diesel, whether it be working on getting grants to modify roof, to replace windows, to upgrade the elevator or lift, even facade restoration, all of this will have significant energy savings, result in significant conservation of energy. And, Square and Compass Promotions does its best through Medium, through its podcast, which I'll leave some links in this video, to promote that and encourage other Masonic buildings to consider the same thing and Masonic lodges to consider the same thing. How can you be more energy efficient and conserve energy? So, we have goals or an action plan for reducing energy and improving efficiency, primarily through promotion of for the next 100 years and encouraging grant applications. Having received expert assessment and advice, when promoting for the next 100 years, we talk with the people involved in the project. We talk with the experts who will do the restoration work, the architectural work, the replacement work, or the modernization work, all of which is done to get advice on how best Masonic buildings can improve and proceed with energy efficient projects. We have, here it says apply, we should say we have encouraged the application to GICB grants, Green Inclusive Community Building grants, even using RET screen analysis, for example, all of which is one of the tools we've talked about, all of which is a way to encourage conservation of energy. And, as an entity, as a business that conducts tours of the Windsor Masonic Temple, we want to encourage as much as we can for that building, for any Masonic building, especially this one, to be as energy efficient as possible. Water conservation, solid waste. Again, not all of this will apply to your entity, but if you're a Masonic building, if you're on a board, are you thinking about these things? Are you thinking about, can you conserve water? Can you reduce solid waste upstream? Can you reduce emissions and pollution? And are you monitoring these things? All of these things, again, it's important for a Masonic building, it's important for any Masonic entity to think about and consider how best to monitor these things. And then once you, again, if you want, you can actually sign up for the sustainability pledge, which I have the pledge in 3 easy steps. You make a public commitment to measure and improve your sustainability performance. If you're a Masonic building, maybe put the pledge on your website. If you're a Masonic lodge, you can maybe throw it in your summons if that's what you want. Square and Compass Promotions, we put our pledge right on our website as well as on our social media channels. You download the pledge guide here. Here's an example of what your public commitment can look at. So in our case, it's Square and Compass Promotions. Actually, you know what? Let me go to Square and Compass Promotions website. So you notice under the About Us section, we have right here, Square and Compass Promotions has signed the Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge to demonstrate our commitment to improving our sustainability score between now and 2030. And then we have this section here. We also put this on our website, on our social media sites. And then we even, just for one example I talked about before, we have the land acknowledgement in both French and English. So that is, I'm going to go back to the main page. Again, Square and Compass Promotions is proud to have taken this pledge because we think it's important that we, as a business that provides tours of the Windsor Masonic Temple, as well as a business that tries to provide information that can assist Masonic buildings and Masonic organizations in being sustainable. We think it's a really important pledge and something that will help us in our goal of sustaining our business, but also encouraging sustainment of the craft and ensuring the craft remains relevant and sustainable. And because of that, we wanted to just go through this because maybe, again, This may give a Masonic building, a Masonic lodge, a Masonic organization some ideas. Even if your lodge, your building isn't necessarily a tourist destination, even if it's not the type of place that encourages visitation, that has regular tours like a Windsor Masonic Temple or Philadelphia Masonic Temple or Detroit Masonic Temple, that doesn't mean that your Masonic building or lodge shouldn't be thinking about sustainability. Again, in your building, what are your current energy costs? Are they higher than they could otherwise be? Can you lower those costs? Can you engage in more sustainable practices so your energy bills are lower? Not only does it make you a good citizen of the community and a good citizen of the world, it's just fiscally responsible. Are you thinking about water conservation, energy conservation? Are you why aren't you as a lodge, as a building, as an organization, inviting people to be in your building? Is it because you don't have the space to hold events or rent out the space for events or invite the community for open houses? Or is it just because you never thought of doing it before? And if it's the latter, you never thought of doing it before, why not give it a shot? Why not give it a try? Why not involve in the community? Does your lodge, does your building, is it involved in the community? Does it make maybe donations? Doesn't have to be monetary donations. Do you collect cans to give to the food bank? Do you take part in holiday initiatives? All these things are part of being sustainable and part of providing a lasting legacy. And all of these things are part of the Sustainable Tourism Accessibility Assessment, or Sustainable Tourism Assessment. And with that, thank you guys so much for checking this out. Leave some comments. Let me know, does your building engage in some of these things in the assessment? Does your lodge engage in some of the things on the assessment? If you do, what has the results been? Has it been a success? And if you don't, or if your lodge or your building doesn't, what are the reasons why not? And would you consider doing some of these things? Leave a comment. Let us know. Thank you guys so much.